We've basically cracked this incredible code on how to articulate value. We created a new type of presentation the agent uses, which lays out the things they're going to do, talks about the amount of time it's going to take them, the activities involved. It basically just gives them the confidence to go, this is the amount of work that's involved in this process. An app that the buyer and the agent use to collaborate. And then we call a closing report. It's a better version of the lawyer bill, but it's essentially, here's a summation of everything I did at the end of the deal, how many hours, days, activities, every single thing that you did fully logged into this beautiful report to let them understand the work that was involved. And I'll tell you, this is the most exciting thing and timely, because if agents don't get really good at articulating value post August 17th, there's going to be a lot less agents.
Hey guys, welcome back. I'm your host, Matt Fagioli, and I am more excited about this particular podcast than any other in a long time. And of course, you say similar things to every podcast guest, but I've been trying to get this guy on the podcast for 6 months, and I have to take the blame because I keep screwing it up. But he's a tough get. He's a big date. So without further ado,
tall
order.
Tall order.
I want you guys to meet James Dwiggins, who is the CEO of NextHome, which is one of the most fastest growing, most amazing franchises in the. How do you describe it, James?
I don't know. We're a great company. We do big things. We're 10 years old. We've got about 630 offices, around 6,000 agents. We love what we're doing, and we're a pretty fast growing company. We'll just put it that way. So,
yeah. Well, and so you've succeeded at what only a handful of other people in the last 20 years have managed to pull off. Lots of, smart guys say, you know what, I'm going to start a brand, and that's a thing that doesn't happen for almost anybody. So how did that work out? What do you think was different about what you did?
Well, so we're about 10 years old now. So we're not a startup anymore. We're sort of a mid-tier company. We looked at the market and felt that a lot of real estate brands were just somewhat kind of old and stodgy. And so we felt like the market could use something more fresh and progressive, just something that's a little bit more geared towards the younger demographic. The home buyer was younger, the home seller was younger, like just everybody was just moving in this sort of new direction. And so we partnered with a really prestigious firm out of New York called Pentagram, basically the best design firm in the world. Like 90% of the brands that you use on a daily basis were designed by them. And we created this sort of forward-thinking brand called NextHome. It's about the consumer. It's about what they're going to do instead of it just being about like the owner's names. And then designed it around everything around the way that the customer wants to experience real estate. And that's just been sort of our core model. The other thing is we have been very clear about, we're not trying to be a company with the most number of agents. That's not meant to be disrespectful, but for us, it's about quality over quantity. And so we focus very heavily on the franchise owners in our organization all share the same sort of core values, and the way that they look at the world's the same as the leadership team. So we're very picky about who we bring into our organization, because that's how they're going to represent the brand in the market. And so for us, it's been a very unique, fun experience of building a company around like-minded people who share the same philosophies. It's not all about production. It's about the way we interact with the community. And we've had a lot of great success. We're privately held. We don't have any venture backing. So my partner and I are the original founders and investors. Our leadership team all owns part of the business. We're like one big family, and it's been a hell of a fun ride. So yeah.
So you said that 630 offices. How many states is that?
We're in 49, basically.
Wow.
The whole US. Yeah.
Okay. And when you I'm fascinated with, again, it's sort of the breakthrough that you went through. Can you talk about kind of the early years, and like, how did you think about it then? Was it one state at a time, and was there an inflection point where it all kind of broke free?
We knew the model of what we were doing was going to be unique in that. So if you do the basic math, just over 600 offices, 6,000 agents, roughly 10 agents per office is our average. We do about $12 billion a year in business. So we do a lot of production. We knew that the largest segment of real estate brokers in the US were smaller independents, and most franchise models didn't fit that. They wanted you to be this bigger office. You had to recruit 200 people. We know that 80% of those 200 people don't do anything. So we looked at it like, this doesn't make any logical sense. Our model allows you to be virtual, so we don't require you to have a brick and mortar location, which fits for like teams and things. We knew going into it that we had created a model and tech stack and experience and service level and all of these things that would fit a very specific segment of the market. And so, in the first year, we added 40 locations because we didn't have any competition. We candidly still really don't for our model. And so we've been able to have early success. We just continued to grow on top of that. And I think that just based upon the amazing people I get to work with on the leadership team, we're just much more down to earth people. We're not corporate America types. I remember helping put yard signs together in the first year and trying to figure out our designs. And we're the type of people who will have a beer with you in the bar. And so we don't wear suits. Like, it's just a different culture. And we've learned a lot for sure. So, in the very beginning, your requirements for franchisee are a lot wider, meaning there's a little bit more room for letting people in. As we got going and started to grow and figure out more about what we wanted and who we wanted to have on that bus with us, we got tighter and tighter with our restrictions. And so we get roughly 50 to 70 inquiries a month. We take 5 to 10 offices out of that. Most of them we decline because it just doesn't fit what we're trying to do. So that's, by the way, one of the secret sauces I think companies make a mistake on. If you try to be everything for everyone, then you have nothing. You just have this thing, and it has no pulse. It has no culture. It just isn't anything. It's just this business that's just bodies coming through. We were very intentional about, and have continued to be intentional about, how to scale with the right people. And the only way you can do that is by saying no more often than you say yes.
I think I heard you say that you're growing by 5 or 6 offices a month. Is that
Mm-hmm. We still are. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Man. Well, let's shift a little bit to the tech. You've had, a important voice in the tech space, important voice in a lot of spaces in the industry, but in the tech space for sure. And I know you recently launched a new product, and I want to hear about that. I think it's, game changer product in the moment. And, we don't want to make it about the product, but I for sure want to hear why you did that and what you think that's going to solve.
So about 10 years ago, my co-founders and I were looking at real estate going, agents are constantly dealing with buyers and sellers questioning why they get paid what they get paid. And we started to really think around that subject of, like, how do we articulate value to the consumer about all the work that's involved in a real estate transaction. And we got a bill from a lawyer. I'm not a big fan of lawyers right now, different conversation, but I'll just go with the analogy. You get a bill at the end of the month and you're like, how is this thing $10,000? But in the bill, it itemizes everything the lawyer did. And what we found interesting about that study was most consumers, actually all of us, we don't remember much of what happened last week. We don't remember what happened even a few days ago. We forget about all the things that occurred. But the bill that the lawyers send reminds you of all the things that happened, most of which you were not involved in. They were doing things behind the scenes, having phone calls, talking to the lawyers, whatever it might have been. And you're like, I forgot about that. I forgot about that. All of that is time, and time is money. So we were like, man, we should figure out a way to allow agents to be able to show all the work that they do, and then give the consumer an experience to see that they're not just not doing anything today. They've been on the phone 5 times. They've been touring properties for you, like all the stuff that you don't realize is occurring behind the scenes. That's 10 years ago. Actually, it's 12 years ago. I started NextHome. I shelved it. It was like, that's just an idea. It'll have to sit for a while. 2 years ago, when I saw these lawsuits going south, which we all are obviously acutely familiar with today, I was like, man, in this new world that we're going to end up in, I believed wholeheartedly that decoupling was going to occur. It is, obviously, that agents are going to have to get very good at articulating their value to be able to get paid from buyers, because they're going to go, why am I paying you this? And so we raised a bunch of money from the industry. I said, I've got this idea. My team and I can do this. We raised 1.2 million from the industry to basically prototype. Can we build an app that integrates on an agent's phone, that tracks their phone calls, the time, not the conversation, but the phone call log, the time, the duration, that tracks their location and how many miles they drove, time to location, time on location, like all the things that are occurring, thinking about it like how a lawyer bills, not that we're suggesting that, to be clear, but just looking at a way we can get all of the activities, time, expenses that an agent does, and create an experience for the buyer to see everything the agent's going to do. And as they're doing it, it's updating them in real time, which then creates this awareness of how much work the agent's doing. So we built it. Then we raised another 3 million from the industry, finished it, launched it. So the product's actually now live. And it is absolutely unbelievable, the experience that it creates for the agent and the buyer. Now, this will be for buyers and sellers. We're just focused on the buy side right now, but the conversation the buyer has is, I had no idea that you were going to do all of these things or all this stuff was occurring, which creates value. And as the agent's doing it, the buyer's like, that's great. So so-and-so got done, this got done, this got done. They're part of the experience. And the experience they have is like completely different than anything they've ever been through before. The agent goes, I didn't realize I was doing all that stuff. And they're going, this is amazing because my buyer is appreciating everything that I'm doing, gives the agent a level of confidence now to talk about their services differently. They can see it. And then here's the most interesting thing. So we did this really interesting study, or the Wave Group did a study that we were working with them on earlier this year. It was 500 buyers. They were asked a series of questions. And one of them was how much time the buyer thinks an agent spends helping them buy a house. Matt, what do you think the amount of time was? Just curious, like the average amount of time.
I bet the consumer thinks it's 10 hours.
Yeah. So 26% thought it was 10 hours or less. 46%, almost half, thought an agent spent less than 15 hours to help them buy a house. Want to know what the actual is?
Should I guess?
Yes. For an agent, average transaction.
50.
80 to 100.
Wow.
So if you think about it, just like it sounds crazy, but it's not. If you track the time from an agent setting an appointment for a showing, driving to the showing, on location for the showing, conversation in the driveway after the showing, driving back, calling the listing agent, having a discussion, getting a copy of the disclosure because they may want to write an offer, going through and reading the disclosure, writing an email to the buyer about everything they need to know about it, having a conversation with the buyer about it, writing an offer. Leave the offer part out. That whole segment you might do 6, 7, 8 times with an average buyer. Every single one of those is between 2 and 3 hours worth of work.
Do you have a category for chasing the cat that we accidentally let out and, driving back to put the key back in the box that I forgot?
I was talking to a guy yesterday who tracking all of his time, and he's like, I spent 29 and a half hours working with a buyer, and then the buyer decided not to do anything. Now imagine if you look at this from a perspective of, if you were a lawyer, you'd still have to pay for those 29 and a half hours. In our situation, we don't. Now, buyers can go, well, it's nothing to do with me. It's true, it's not. But if you average that time out over what an agent does, the amount of activities they do, the interesting part is I think agents are going to find that they make way less money than they even think they do. Because if you take out, I got the lead from Zillow or Realtor.com and paid out a 30 to 40% referral fee. I got a broker split. I'm an independent contractor, so I got to pay my own federal and state income taxes. I got operational costs. And you deduct all that down based upon the net of what you're getting and divide it by the time. I'm going to willing to bet you an average agent makes 50 to $100 an hour.
If that, yeah, absolutely.
Depending on the market. And that's
when you said 100 hours, I was like, man, you do that in some markets, you do that math and you're better off,
Mm-hmm. So we've basically cracked this incredible code on how to articulate value. We created a new type of presentation the agent uses, which lays out the things they're going to do, talks about the amount of time it's going to take them, the activities involved. It basically just gives them the confidence to go, this is the amount of work that's involved in this process. An app that the buyer and the agent use to collaborate. And then we call a closing report. It's a better version of the lawyer bill, but it's essentially, here's a summation of everything I did at the end of the deal, how many hours, days, activities, every single thing that you did fully logged into this beautiful report to let them understand the work that was involved. And I'll tell you, out of all the things I've ever been involved in, this is the most exciting thing and timely, because if agents don't get really good at articulating value post August 17th, there's going to be a lot less agents.
I tell you, the thing I love the most about this is it's a double-edged sword in a great way. So the great agents, the guys who do all the work and the girls who do all the work and put in those 100 hours are going to have an amazing tool and an amazing experience. And it's going to expose all the lazy asses.
Oh, totally.
Doing the job.
Totally right. It will expose it. And we think long-term, our marketing team is talking about this, that there's potentially a play here for Raise to create a mechanism where consumers want to work with a Raise empowered agent. Meaning I'm not going to work with an agent that doesn't provide this type of experience because I want to know what you're doing. I want to have an idea on where we are. I don't want to have anxiety all the time trying to figure out what my agent's working on. And we think that there's a there because if you ask buyers what the biggest concern they have is, it's always around, I don't know what's happening next. And I'm getting anxiety. Was my offer accepted? What's like, they're just constantly by the phone freaking out. This eliminates all of that because they're seeing everything in real time. So we believe, whether it's Raise or a competitor at some point, that what we've created is definitely the foundation for a new real estate experience.
Yeah, it's a new category, and it's awesome. So I think if I understand it correctly, like it's sort of not widely available yet. Is that right?
It's not. Our investors are the industry. We're doing one last investment round right now. That's the last round we're going to do. So our investors are receiving it first as part of our deal with them. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, but that investor network now consists of about 400,000 realtors. So it's only going to be available probably in the next 12 months through our investor network. And then it'll be available for general release after that. There's just so many people that have jumped in to get it that we have to service them first.
So if you're hearing this podcast and you'd fall into one of two categories. One, I might just want to be on a wait list, and two, I might actually fall into that investor category. How do I find that?
Yeah, just reach out to us. You can just literally send me an email for that matter. It's just james@raise.com, RAYSE.com, and the website there. And you can get on either list. We have a very big list of wait lists. I think it's about 400 companies right now on that, but you can get on the wait list, and we're moving very quickly. Like, our team is very acutely aware that we need to move faster, and we're trying to onboard more, on a faster scale. But we're moving to our Series A later in the fall, where we're going to do a pretty significant fundraise with venture backing, and that will really help accelerate the business quicker to get this product in everybody's hands as quickly as possible. So
cool. Well,
yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. And
yeah,
I'm trying to jam through a bunch of stuff here and stay in our timeline. But James, you've been, to my mind, maybe the voice I listen to the most about what's happening in DOJ world and all of that bizarro world stuff. And, you've been incredibly vocal, and I think, really level-headed and well thought out about what you're saying. So I want you to share, maybe, I don't know, your top 3 things, if there is such a thing, that agents and brokers need to know about where we are right now. We're obviously going into the effective date of this whole process, and, share a little bit of Cliff Notes with us on that.
Yeah, there's 2 areas to be really concerned about. I'm not going to cover the August 17th rules. Everybody should be aware of that. And if you're not, then you've been living in a hole. So the 2 things to be most concerned about is these commission sharing websites that are popping up everywhere. I'm going to strongly encourage you not to participate in those. The language of the settlement in NAR very, very clearly prohibits MLSs and associations from, putting essentially cooperative compensation on aggregator websites. It's ambiguous a little bit as to whether brokerages or agents can do that or not. However, these lawyers are able and eager to sue you for anything. They do not want aggregated websites where consumers are searching or agents are looking at properties based upon commission rates being offered. You are asking to get sued if you participate. You have to remember the Department of Justice has been very clear about this, that they do not want those aggregator websites to exist. That is an entity with unlimited resources that could bankrupt your company if it wanted to come after you. And I think that while the settlement doesn't prohibit that aggregation of that data, I would not be doing it, because nobody listening to this podcast can afford the legal defense costs in an antitrust case. To be very clear, the risk is not worth the reward. You can share your offer of compensation on your own website, on your own listing, on the brokerage website, but you do not commingle that with other companies' data. You are asking to get sued. So I want to make that very clear. It doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. If you get sued, you will be spending $50,000 to $60,000 a month in legal defense, which none of you can afford to do. So I know this. I'm a named defendant in a case. I know what the legal defense costs are. It's not fun. You don't want to get into that boat. Secondly, form sharing or sharing of commissions through forms. Be very cautious, because if you think about these cases, the whole premise of these cases was a committee of competing companies got together to create rules that forced cooperative compensation in the MLS that they claim propped up compensation that was harming consumers. And then we got sued and they convinced the jury that we were doing all of these things, which we all know wasn't actually happening, but that's not the point. That's how the trial went. If you are using standardized forms created by a committee of competing brokers that now does cooperative compensation through the forms, that is potentially propping up compensation, the same claim they're going to use again, I'm going to discourage you from doing that, because you're going to create another opportunity for them to sue you. Whether they do or not, I don't know. I'm not a plaintiff's lawyer. I'm simply pointing out that you're doing the same thing that already got us in trouble in another mechanism. The other thing I'll share with you is this. This is controversial, but just logically think about it. You don't need to share commissions. There's no reason to do it. You can tell the seller and ask the seller what they want to do. If they say, I want to offer cooperative compensation, you can do that. You can advertise the seller is willing to pay whatever. The difference between just removing yourself from the process is don't do it through the form where you're collecting and remitting. Just advertise it and then tell the buyer to put the request in the purchase contract. So Matt, just make sure everybody follows it. Instead of me collecting and remitting to the cooperating broker, just have the seller pay it through the closing process. I just removed myself from the whole process. There's no legal liability there. The same thing occurred without now increasing my liability or my risk as a brokerage. There's no reason to share commissions. The end. I don't care what NER says. I don't care what anybody else says. You can get the same exact result without having to increase your liability with these lawyers that are obviously suing people for all sorts of stuff. So those are the three things that I think people need to pay very close attention to and be very aware of. Brokerages and agents need to have a process in place. They need to think about these policies. They need to think about what they want to do. They need to think about their level of risk and how to move towards this, what we call more consumer-centric model, which is just remove yourself from that process and put it in the purchase contract. Does that make sense?
Man, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. One last question. How are you thinking about the need to be able to prove the variability of commissions and things like that going forward, or is that not a concern?
Ask your question a little further. I just want to make sure I understood what your question was.
Are you, as a broker and a franchisor, concerned about or responsible to be able to go backwards and prove now that basically, prove your innocence rather than them proving your guilt?
Well, I'm a franchisor, not a brokerage. So we don't dictate what our offices do and never have. That's never been part of our model. It isn't actually for most franchises. That being said, there is no set standard commission rate. There never has been. I have 600 and something offices. Commission rates range from 0 to whatever. I mean, we've seen it all over the map. It's just, that's literally how it operates. Also, the advertised commission rate is never actually what usually the number ends up being once the deal's closed, which people don't seem to understand, that there's all sorts of things that are done during the process to get a deal done. I think that to kind of go further with your question, I think we are encouraging our membership to continue to look at what the needs are from buyers and sellers and figuring out ways that it serves them the best. I can't speak to what our offices will do because they're all independently owned and operated. What I can say is I do think in the future, the industry will have, there already is, but you'll see more of it, where you'll see percentage, which I still think will be the most common form of compensation rate. I think you'll see a menu of services, which has been around since 1976 when Help You Sell was formed. So pick what you want and pay, which the lawyers didn't seem to understand. And then flat fee, which has also been around for a long time too. I just think you'll see more variety of that. And then levels of service. I also think, grand idea, you'll see the Ritz-Carlton experience where it'll be more than what people have paid, but you get everything. Not only the transaction, but I'm going to send a moving company to pack all your shit, move it to the next location, unpack it. Like, I think you're going to see a whole different level of that, which exists today, just more of that as things continue forward. And then not to be negative about it, but I think you'll see a lot less agents. I do.
Yeah.
I think you're going to see somewhere between 20 to 40% of the industry go away, where it's going to be dependent upon a lot of things, but that attrition rate will make the industry more professional. And I think you'll see brokerages starting to move into areas where they're being smarter about their finances and big offices and more virtual and just kind of moving towards the next direction of where this industry should be operating.
Man, thanks. Yeah, I think all of it net has to increase professionalism, which is something that we've all said for a long time that we wanted. And now it's just going to, happen because it just has to.
Yeah. One last comment, just because you were asking, this is just, it's been humorous to me the whole time that the media and, the Department of Justice and the lawyers for that matter talk about these standard commission rates. Do you know what the average commission rate was in the United States in 2020, basically right around the time frame all of these class action cases were filed? Do you know what it was?
6-ish.
So 4.94. That was the average. So if 4.94 was the average in 2020, that means that there were commissions lower and higher. So this number that you're seeing out there that the media's used forever, which literally take you 15 minutes to do your own research, in 2020, most of these cases were filed in 2019 and 2020. We're claiming the 6% number. The commission rate had been coming down since 2001. And down to a low of 4.94 in 2020, which means people were paying a lot lower and a lot higher. So there was no 6% number. There never has been. It hasn't been that number since 2001 or 2000 or even earlier than that. So just this concept of this standardized thing doesn't exist. And if you actually looked at the deals that closed and looked at those numbers differently than what was advertised, you'd see far greater insight. We as an industry should have been producing some of that data. It would have been easier to defend it, but we didn't, and here we are. So,
James, thanks
facts.
so much for taking
Facts
the time,
are hard.
man.
Yeah,
Dude, you brought a ton there. I know everybody's going to dig it, and I hope you come back and join us here soon.
happy to do it.
Yes, man. Cool.
Yep, appreciate it.